What is up, and welcome back to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. As always, I am your host, Brandon Silvers. Today, I will be previewing this upcoming WNBA season, which starts on the 14th. But first, if you are in the Charleston area, I am emceeing the light show featuring Mr. Enlightenment and Friends on Friday, May 17th out at Hobcob Brewing Company. For those of you who don't know, it's a poetry show, but there's going to be music, merch. You can definitely get something to drink responsibly, of course, because it is a brewery. Should be a fun time. Again, Friday, May 17th from 7 to 9 p.m. Tickets are $10 in advance and $15 at the door. Come see your boy. Okay, WNBA season is upon us. 12 teams vying for 8 playoff spots. In the offseason was pretty busy as teams made moves to try to be one of those 8. What'd you miss? What should you expect? Let's go through each team and break it down so you're up to speed and know enough to be able to enjoy this year as much as possible right from the jump. Going in alphabetical order, we are starting with the Atlanta Dream. Do it for the Dream. They entered last season with high expectations, but they were streaky. They did manage to make the postseason, but were swept by Dallas in the first round. What should you expect from them this season? It's important to keep in mind that while they weren't as good as people had hoped, they did improve last year. That was their first playoff appearance since 2018. 2022 Rookie of the Year Ryan Howard was even better in her second season. And Alicia Gray, who they acquired from Dallas last offseason, had the best season of her career. Despite all those good things, they didn't achieve what many expected them to for several reasons. For starters, they just had bad luck injury-wise. It happens, but it shined a very bright light on their main problems of coaching and roster construction. Problem might be the wrong word for the coaching aspect. Tanisha Wright, who is headed into her third season, is developing as a coach. We don't think of coaches as developing, but they do in the very same way that players do. You have to get a feel for the in-game adjustments, rotations, developing your team's identity, a system, all that fun stuff. This is hard enough as is, but imagine trying to do that with players in and out of the lineup due to injury. She's certainly improving, but I think throwing the injury obstacles in her way slowed down that development a bit because it was yet another variable she had to deal with. Now, I'd say the roster construction was very much a problem and one that became apparent immediately and was only worsened by the injury issues. Specifically, this team badly needed a point guard and a center. Now, they did attempt to address this offseason by trading for Jordan Canada and signing Tina Charles. Canada had one of the more incredible stories in the league last season as she entered the year with just a training camp contract and ended up finishing second in the tightly contested most improved player voting while earning first team all defense honors. She also brings much needed playoff experience, having won 2 titles as a backup with the Storm early in her career. Tina Charles is one of the most decorated players in WNBA history. She's won almost every individual accolade you could win in this league over the course of her 12-year career, including being named Most Valuable Player in 2012. So, do these two solve the Dream's issues? Not quite. Now, Canada, Gray, and Howard form one of the best wing trios in the league, but unfortunately, Canada is out with a hand injury, and at the time of this recording, there's no word on when she'll be back. And as great as Charles has been, she was out of the league last year, and the last time we saw her, she didn't look like the player she used to be, especially on the defensive end. Nothing I've seen this preseason has done anything to make me optimistic on that front either. So the Dream head into this season with essentially the same roster issues as last year, at least until Canada comes back, which means they're relying on the improvement of the pieces they've had, starting, of course, with Coach Wright. I do think Howard continues to progress and will become an MVP candidate sooner or later. At 6'2", she's got fantastic size for someone who possesses her skill set and can score at all 3 levels. I was pleasantly surprised at how quickly she and Gray figured out their pairing. They drafted players who are all remaining overseas this season, which signals to me the faith they have in last year's draft picks Haley Jones and Letitia Amihir. Jones was in the rotation but had some ups and downs as they worked to figure out which position she will be most effective at. Have they gotten any closer to figuring that out? Is her jumper coming along, or has she figured out how to work around that? Those are the major questions surrounding her, but there's plenty of things she can do. And based on what we saw from her at Stanford and reading between the lines, I think she's going to be a key piece off the bench for them. We didn't see Ami here much last year, but she played in AU over the offseason and provided the defense we basically know is there from her time at South Carolina, while also showing off some scoring ability. She's a versatile defender, and I think that alone earns her playing time this season. And this isn't a team that needs a lot of scoring from her, but I am curious to see how much of that carries over to the W. Overall, I do think they take another step forward this year. How big of a step depends on how quickly Canada returns and how fast they can develop chemistry after that. I didn't even mention Cheyenne Parker-Tyus, who was an all-star last year, but all of these great perimeter players should open things up even more for her as well. Unfortunately, this is a big dominant league, and their lack of a center puts a cap on their potential. So if they don't address that via trade, they'll be right back in that 5 to 8 range for the playoffs. However, they are moving in the right direction. Okay, moving on to the Chicago Sky. They had an action-packed couple of years here. Unfortunately, all action isn't good action. They managed to sneak into the playoffs last year despite coach and GM James Wade pretty much gutting the roster before leaving in the middle of the year. More moves came in the offseason as they hired WNBA legend Teresa Weatherspoon as coach, traded away Kalia Copper, and drafted Camila Cardoso and Angel Reese. What should you expect from the Sky this season? Simply put, D and D, more specifically Dana Evans and defense. Evans was a bucket in college at Louisville and has been steadily improving over the course of her time in the W. She was third in the 6th Player of the Year voting last season, and it looks like Weatherspoon is handing her the keys to the offense in a starting role this year. Preseason is preseason, but she looked like the best player on the court during their blowout win against the Liberty. Even with the limitations of the Liberty's players in mind, she was like 3 steps quicker than everybody on the court. There was a lot of speculation about what this team should do at point guard, especially after losing Courtney Williams, but it appears the solution was on the roster this whole time. As far as the defense is concerned, that's Coach Weatherspoon's calling card all the way back to her playing days when she won the first 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards in league history. This was a team that was next to last in defensive rebounding and opponent field goal percentage last year, so Spoon's expertise is much needed, and they also drafted 2 players in Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso who should help with both issues immediately. Well, not quite immediately for Cardoso, who is out indefinitely with a shoulder injury, but she helped lead the Gamecocks to an undefeated season with her defense and shot blocking. At 6'7", she's an imposing figure down low and should also help get easy buckets on offense thanks to her ability to run the floor. Reese should also help on offense by getting easy buckets and creating extra possessions thanks to her otherworldly offensive rebounding ability. You just cannot keep her off the boards. Her offensive game will expand, but in the meantime, she's going to get plenty of points off putbacks and getting to the free throw line. Marina Mabry is the leading returning scorer for this team. She was streaky to begin last season, but she seemed to get her footing as they made their playoff push. If we get a full season of her playing with the consistency she showed during that stretch, it'll go a long way to easing concerns about where this team is going to find points. And honestly, that's the biggest question mark for them right now. They're going to play hard. They're going to defend. They appear to already have bought into what Coach Weatherspoon wants to do. Can they put points on the board? This feels like everyone's sleeper pick for a playoff team, and who am I to go against the masses? If you can stop the other team from scoring and create easy buckets off turnovers, you're going to be in games, and this team should have no trouble doing that. They're still inexperienced, and there's always an adjustment period when a new coaching staff and this many new pieces come in, so some limitations are there, but I could see them fighting for one of those last 2 playoff spots. Next up, we have the Connecticut Sun. They headed into last season fresh off a finals loss and moving some big pieces as head coach Kurt Miller and former WNBA MVP Jonquel Jones both moved on. Then just 13 games in, Brianna Jones went down with a season-ending Achilles injury. Plenty of reasons to write the season off, but the Sun battled and finished with the 3rd best record in the league. Walking triple-double Alyssa Thomas had an MVP caliber year in the process, and word of Dewana Bonner's wired hangerness had been greatly exaggerated. Now, they did lose to the Liberty in the semis, so what can we expect from them this season? If last offseason's moves were a couple of haymakers, then this offseason's were more comparable to a flurry of jabs. Tiffany Hayes retired, and they traded Beck Allen and Natasha Heidemann for Mariah Jefferson and Tiffany Mitchell, respectively. But amazingly, Brianna Jones is expected to be ready to play at the beginning of the season. She might be on a minutes restriction to start, and you never know how long it takes to return to form after such a brutal injury, but she plays a huge role in what they want to do. They were a step below the Aces and Liberty last year due to spacing issues on offense, and with the departure of Heidemann, Allen, and Hayes, they lose 3 of their top 4 leaders in three-point field goal attempts. DeWanna Bonner led the team in attempts, but her percentage isn't high enough where I'd classify her as a true threat from out there. Now, Dejanay Carrington and Ty Harris both shot a career high from beyond the arc at 37% and a ridiculous 46% from Harris last year, so I'd expect them to be encouraged to fire away more this season. They also brought in Rachel Banham, who hit like 89 threes their last preseason game, and the aforementioned Mariah Jefferson, and they both can really shoot it. How much space can they give Alyssa Thomas to operate is the name of the game here. The margin for error on offense is greater with players like Thomas and Bonner, and when you have the top scoring defense in the league like they did last year. This is a team that's made it to at least the semis in each of the past 5 seasons, but has never won the title. Does that change this year? I don't think so. I like the moves they've made. Thomas and Bonner show no signs of slowing down, and they just traded for Queen Egbo to help make their defense even stronger, but I still think that they're lacking the offensive firepower necessary to win a championship. I mean, only one team is going to win it all, but I do think the Sun will still have a great season. This team personifies grit, and I'm excited to see Harris take on a bigger role. They could very well find themselves back in that 3 spot this year, and I find it hard to see them falling below 6th if their main pieces stay healthy. All right, let's talk about the Dallas Wings. They entered last season with many unknowns. They had spent the previous offseason undergoing a major overhaul, from hiring Letitia Trammell as coach to trading starters Alicia Gray, Marina Mabry, and Kayla Thornton. However, they overcame all of it to claim the 4th seed behind a high-octane offense led by Arike Ogunbowale, Natasha Howard, and Satu Sabally. They swept the Dream in the first round before being swept themselves by the eventual champion Aces. What can we expect this season? Size and shots for starters. The addition of last year's draft pick Stephanie Soares, who missed the season with an injury, gives them a third player who is at least 6'6". How she fits into the rotation with Kalani Brown and Tierra McCowan remains to be seen, but it's a good problem to have. Speaking of last year's draft picks, Lou Lopez Seneschal also missed all of last year due to injury, but she appears ready to go. And Maddie Segrest did play last season, but she struggled to crack the rotation. However, she has looked much more decisive during her time in the AU and in the preseason. The Wings drafted JC Sheldon this year. She should be able to contribute defensively right out the gate. She's a tough guard who can also run the offense, and she shoots it well enough that she forces opposing defenses to pay attention to her. Now, she finished well at the rim in college, but I have to see her do it at this level to believe it because she's got such a small frame. They also seem to have stumbled across another key contributor in Jaylen Brown. Like the NBA's Jaylen Brown, she also played college ball at Cal. She graduated in 2020 but hasn't played in the WNBA yet, but she certainly looked like a WNBA player against the Fever in their preseason game when she dropped 21 points. Speaking of points, scoring is this team's calling card, but I'm also concerned about their offense. Ogunbowale was number 5 in points per game last season, but too often the offense turns into Arike or bust. There's a lot of offensive talent on this team, which makes her shot selection even more frustrating. She's incredibly talented, but not nearly efficient enough to justify taking some of the shots she takes when she takes them. There are few players I'd rather have with the ball in their hands at the end of games, but this team would be better if she got it out of her hands more often the other 38 minutes. These offensive issues could get even worse with the injury to Satu Sabally. She earned the league's most improved player award last year as she averaged career highs in like every single category. Now, everyone knew the potential was there, but various health issues had prevented her from fulfilling it until finally her body cooperated and she was able to play in nearly as many games last season as her previous 3 years combined. Unfortunately, the health issues have popped up again as she's dealing with a shoulder injury that's going to keep her out until after the Olympics. Now, the good news is she's expected to play for her home country of Germany, so when she does come back, she should already be in basketball shape. But still, that's a huge piece that's going to be out for so long, and I think they take a while to figure out how to deal with that, and that adjustment period is going to prevent them from grabbing that 4th seed again. They will ultimately make the playoffs though, but somewhere in the chaos that's going to be those 5 through 8 seeds. The Indiana Fever are next. Did they do anything interesting this offseason? Has anybody heard? Let's talk about last season first. They were bad. But if you squinted, you could kind of see the vision. Aaliyah Boston won Rookie of the Year. 2022 second overall pick Nalissa Smith put up 15 and 9. And Kelsey Mitchell was an all-star for the first time, averaging 18 points a game. And of course, now they have added Caitlin Clark to the mix. The Fever's preseason has given us a pretty good idea of what to expect from her. Obviously, she's going to knock down threes, a lot of them, from all over the court, and the playmaking is going to be there as well. But there are also going to be some bumps adjusting to the physicality and pace, as Coach Christy Sides talked about after both games, is going to be exhausting, especially with no real break for her between college and the W season. And she has to unlearn some habits she picked up at Iowa, where it was a one-woman show. She will look worn down some games, particularly as the season progresses. She's going to struggle to defend at times, but she's still Caitlin Clark and the favorite to win Rookie of the Year. The combination of Clark and Boston has been talked about since last year. That pick and roll will not only open things up for them to do work, but also everyone else on the court. Also, we know about Clark's passing, but Boston is an underrated passer as well. Passing was not a skill that came easily to this team last season, but when your 2 most talented players are this unselfish, it makes it easier for everyone else to share the ball too. They should get a ton of easier looks on offense as a result. Defensively, they were bad last season. That's a big reason for a lot of their losses. You can see how they're trying to improve, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Offensively, I do want to see if Boston has gotten more aggressive. Post players are at the mercy of their guards to get them the ball, but even with that in mind, I still felt like she should have been demanding the ball more, and when she got it, just go to work. She does appear to have gotten stronger in the offseason, so I wonder if that's going to help her be a little bit more assertive on offense, but she's too skilled to go long stretches without a touch the way that she did at points last season. They have a ton of talent, but it still feels like there are moves to be made for them. I'm curious which pieces GM Lynn Dunn uses to make that happen. If it's me, I'm probably moving the vets if possible. Long term, the future is blinding. They have great young players, cap space, everything you could want. How quickly can they turn that into their reality? This is a playoff contender for me right now. I don't think they're good enough yet, particularly on defense, to claim a top 4 seed. And if they do make it, they're going to have to survive the battle for one of those lower seeds, but that would be a hell of a turnaround with all of their potential in front of them. It is time to talk about the defending champion Las Vegas Aces. In the words of Hove, what more can I say? First repeat champion since the Lisa Leslie Sparks in 2002, going for the first three-peat since the Houston Comets started the league with 4 in a row. Oh, and they finished off the finals in New York without Chelsea Gray, Candace Parker, and Kia Stokes. Chelsea and Kia are back this year though, but of course Candace just retired right before training camp started, quite possibly the greatest to ever do it. Speaking of GOATs, Asia Wilson is certainly on track to have her name in that conversation very soon. Rookie of the Year, 2-time MVP, probably should have been a third last year, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 2-time WNBA champion now as well. Oh, and by the way, she is entering just her 7th season. People wrote them off after Gray went down with her foot injury, which tells you how important she is to this squad. She averaged a career high and league-leading 7.3 assists per game last year, and it's not just that she gets assists, but how she gets them. Her vision is something out of X-Men. Kelsey Plum would be the number one option on offense on a lot of teams in this league, and you could probably say the same thing about Jackie Young too. When people talk about how adjusting to the W looks for players coming from college, Gray, Plum, and Young are the names that come to mind for me. 3 first-round draft picks, Plum and Young both went number 1 overall, and all 3 had struggles to start their careers. Chelsea averaged 7 points a game as a rookie, got traded, then averaged 6 a game. She didn't even become a starter until her 3rd season, and now look at her. Kelsey started from the jump, but went from being the leading scorer in D1 women's hoops history to not even averaging double figures until her 4th season. And then there's Jackie, who everyone thought was a bust. Started year 1, but was terrible, 6.5 points a game on 32% from the field. Her 3-point shooting kept getting worse, even as the rest of her offense improved to the point where she could be left open on the perimeter. Good luck with that now, as she hit 45% of them last year on 5 attempts per game. So these 3 are exactly why I try not to rush to judgment on a player in their 1st, 2nd, even 3rd year sometimes. Alicia Clark is one of my favorite players to watch. She was 6th player of the year last year, her 1st with the Aces. Her defensive performance in that closeout game against Breanna Stewart was a masterpiece. Stewart went 3 for 17 and was forced to pass off the potential game-winning shot. They are stacked with top-end talent. The concern is depth, especially with all of the extra deep playoff run mileage on their bodies. They're trying to piece it all together with young players and cast-offs from other teams, and if anyone can figure out how to make it work, it's Coach Becky Hammon. I mean, this has kind of just been their reality the past couple seasons, but again, my concern is just the accumulation of all the minutes since they have been playing deep into the postseason. Even with that, you'd be crazy not to have them as your favorite. I guess they could maybe slide down to the 2nd seed depending on how aggressively they want to manage minutes in the regular season, but they're battle tested and they seem to really love each other as a team. If they're healthy, the rest of the league is going to have to prove to me that they can be beat. The Los Angeles Sparks are in full-blown rebuild mode, but when you look at what they're doing and who should be available in next year's draft, you can kind of see what the plan is, but what should you expect from them this season? They managed to come away with not 1 but 2 potential franchise cornerstones in this year's draft. They drafted Cam Brink, 2nd overall out of Stanford. She should provide defense immediately. She averaged 3 blocks per game over the course of her college career, which is insane. She seems even longer than 6'4" and moves very well for a player her size. Now she needs to cut down on fouling, but the extra foul they get in the W should help her out a little bit. Offensively, she improved every season at Stanford. Most notably, she took her free throw percentage from the low to mid 60s all the way up to the mid 80s. That lets me know that there's a jumper in there somewhere, and I'm curious to see the range she develops on it. She's been shooting threes in the preseason, and if she can knock those down consistently, she is going to be a matchup nightmare. They got Rakia Jackson, 4th overall out of Tennessee, and she's got a chance to make an impact on both ends of the court immediately. She rebounds and defends well and can score whenever she wants inside the 3-point line. I want to see if she's able to extend her range behind the 3-point line as well, but I'm most interested in seeing how they tap into her playmaking ability. She showed flashes at Tennessee, but had to carry the bulk of the scoring load because of the talent around her. That would open up her scoring more than anything at this level, in my opinion at least. Those are the 2 players I'm by far the most excited about. After that, it kind of goes downhill. De'Erica Hamby, she's an elite role player. She's shown that time and time again. Maybe we get to see her take on a little bit more with this roster. Interested to see how that would look. Lexi Brown appears to be healthy again. She was good what little bit we did see of her last season. Outside of that, there's a lot of holes in this roster. No proven center on this roster. Azurá Stevens played the 5 some, but she prefers the 4. And she's out with an injury for a couple of months at the very least. Brink, more of a power forward too. They let Jordan Canada go, so now who do they roll with at point guard? I mean, I guess it's going to be Lexi Brown. They do have Ari McDonald on the roster as of right now too. They both seem very combo guardish to me though. And then on top of that, where do the points come from now that Neck is gone? Just way more questions than answers for this team. The good news is you're going to get to see the rookies a lot, and Kurt Miller as your head coach has to make you feel okay about the future. This is going to be a bottom 2 team this season. The focus is clearly developing the rookies, gauging the value of the other pieces, and getting a high draft pick, and they seem built to do that very, very well. Moving on to the Minnesota Lynx, a very uneven season last year that evened out at the end as they finished just under 500, lost in the first round to the Sun. Cheryl Reeve has been making moves up there this offseason, so what can you expect out of them this year? If I were a betting man, I'd bet a lot of money that Napheesa Collier is the best player in the league that most people don't know about. She came back last season after giving birth and put up 21.5 points, 8.5 boards, a couple of assists, a steal, and a block per game. Obviously, she is the centerpiece of this roster. The other pieces I would be most excited about if I were a Lynx fan came in last year's draft in the form of Diamond Miller and Dorka Juhas. Diamond's like 6'3", can play on the wing. She missed some time due to injury and certainly didn't have the postseason showing she would have liked to, but that's not uncommon for W rookies. She's got a very diverse skill set, can do a little bit of everything on both ends of the court, and the one real knock on her was her three-point shooting, but she flashed some potential there. You can see why she was the second overall pick and all-rookie first team, even with the missed time. Dorka was more of a surprise second-round pick, which isn't necessarily a guaranteed roster spot, much less playing time, and she didn't play a lot early on, but then her number was called and they couldn't keep her off the court. 11 games with double-digit rebounds, including 4 in a row to end the regular season. She's 6'4", 6'5", kind of a stretch power forward, likes to step out and shoot it. You'd like to see her percentages tick up a little bit, but overall, a great find for the Lynx. Throw in Kayla McBride and you've got a good core right there, but Cheryl Reeve was like, nah, watch this, and went out and signed Alana Smith and Courtney Williams and traded for Natisha Heidemann. Smith is big, she can handle it well for a post player, she's great in the pick and roll as a screener, she can rebound, block some shots. If you're good at pattern recognition, you're starting to catch on to the fact that the Lynx love players who are well-rounded. Smith and Williams both played a big role in this guy not hitting rock bottom during everything they went through last season. Williams fits that well-rounded mold as well, as she's just 5'8", but an incredible rebounder for her size. 5 out of the past 6 seasons, she's averaged at least 5 rebounds a game. She can run the point, score, she's going to hit threes, so is Heidemann, who can also play the point if Williams needs a break or if they want to slide her over to the 2. You can certainly see the plan offensively, but these additions will also help out a great deal on defense, and that's where they had most of their struggles last season. So are they going to make the playoffs again? This one's going to be tight, but my gut says yes. However, they need a true second option on offense, and I feel a whole lot better if that's Diamond Miller because it signals an improvement that needs to be made for this team to truly compete. Also, they clearly love versatility, but there's no true center on this roster as of this recording, and in a league that's so big dominant, that's scary to me. Positionless basketball is great or whatever, but I'm still a big believer in true point guards and true centers. So I think they end up being in the mix for a lower seed when it's all said and done, but they should be a better overall team than last year, even if the end result looks very similar. Okay, here we go. The New York Liberty put together the super team last offseason, finished second in the league despite having some rough patches, figuring things out. They were able to win anyways, made it to the finals where they looked like they were going to get swept. Then they looked like they were going to coast to a ring, and then they got upset at home to lose. The super team has decided to run it back. Maybe last year's experience can propel them to the title this year. What should you expect? Obviously, they're not lacking in star power. Breanna Stewart was last season's MVP and one of the best to ever play. And while this team was winning games, they didn't look quite right until Jonquel Jones, a former MVP herself, started playing like herself. Everyone's heard of Sabrina Ionescu and her three-point shooting, and while Courtney Vandersloot is nearing the end of her legendary career, she can still make plays with the best of them. Benaja Laney Hamilton doesn't have nearly the accolades of everyone I just mentioned, but there may not be a better role player in the W. She's been a number one option in the league before, an all-star, and when players are asked to sacrifice their offense for the good of the team like she's been asked, sometimes they struggle, but she just doubled down on what makes her great. Defense and timely shot making. Doesn't matter if she's taking 13 shots or 3, when it's her time to shoot, it's going in. So with all of this talent, why am I still so meh on them? I mean, yeah, they'll almost certainly have a top 3 record, but why is it so hard for me to take them seriously? Well, let's take a look at their blowout preseason loss to the Sky. First of all, it's the preseason. We're not going to overreact to it. They're not going to be losing by 50 regularly or probably at all, but that game highlighted a lot of issues that were problems last year and still don't appear to have been addressed. The big one is they can't defend guards. I guess we could say quick guards if we wanted to be nice, but they really struggle to stay in front of any guard. And by they, I mean Vandersloot and Ionescu. Like I said, Vandersloot's best days are behind her. The flashes of her former self we do see are all on the offensive end of the court. Ionescu just can't move laterally. At this point, it is what it is. She's not going to suddenly become quick side to side. Even more concerning is how confused Sabrina looked about the defensive scheme and knowing her assignment in that Sky game. Again, one preseason game, a handful of possessions, but Benijah was having to direct her on the court, and at one point Sabrina appeared to be guarding her. Now, in reality, what probably happened is she thought it was a switch and it wasn't, but it looked bad and kind of reinforces my point about being unclear on the scheme. Everyone has lapses, but you really can't afford to when you have that lateral quickness issue. And all these star players cost money, so their cap space didn't allow them to bring in more depth where they could use a guard to spell Vandersloot more often or bring in a defensive guard if opposing guards are really lighting them up. I imagine that's why they drafted Marquisha Davis, and she's a good player, but it's very dangerous to rely on a rookie for such a critical role on a team that's supposed to be contending for a title. And I certainly expect him to do just that and contend, but I can't tell you how they've managed to get any better. They're essentially the same team as last year, but a year older, with a key piece who really can't afford to be a year older. They also got clowned pretty bad for losing the title at home to an Aces team that was missing major pieces due to injury. They had their heart, mental toughness, chemistry, all questioned. I was kind of hoping they'd come out playing with an edge, trying to make everyone eat their words, and maybe they will, but to have your coach questioning your effort after a preseason game doesn't make me super confident in that. But look, this team is too talented to be bad. They look much better in their next preseason game against the Sun, and I expect that some of their issues from last year will be solved by virtue of having played together a full year now, but I just can't picture them winning it all. This could certainly change over the course of the season, and I have them no worse than third in the league in the regular season right now, so it's not like I'm predicting disaster, but I need to see them rise to the challenge. Cruising right along, the Phoenix Mercury. Last season was pretty much a disaster, but they cleaned house about as much as a franchise can clean house. New owner, new coach, a bunch of new faces. How is it going to work out? This was the hardest team for me to figure out. Talent-wise, their cup overfloweth. They brought in Kalia Copper, who seems to get better and better the more she's asked to do, and she was asked to do a lot last season in Chicago. While I expect her to be featured heavily in Phoenix, I mean, you typically don't trade that many assets for a player that you don't intend to feature heavily. I don't think she'll be asked to do quite as much as she was last season, but it's good to know she can if and when you need it. They also signed Natasha Cloud, one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. The Mercury had the worst defensive rating in the W last year, so having someone who can effectively shut down the tone setters for the opposing team's offense goes a long way towards solving that problem. She's also a great playmaker in her own right, and I'm looking forward to seeing how she gets all of these talented offensive players in the mix. They're bringing back their top 3 scorers from last season in Sophie Cunningham, Diana Taurasi, and Brittany Griner. Sophie's percentages took a dip last season, and I think that's because she had to create her own offense a lot last year. Cloud's presence should fix that and allow Sophie to do what she does best, which is knock down open threes. Respectfully, Taurasi is no longer able to carry an offense. She's probably best as a 4th or 5th option. With everyone they brought in, that's probably where she'll slot in. Also, everyone else in this starting lineup can defend, so they should be able to hide her on that end of the court. And Griner's had an entire offseason at home to focus on basketball. I still don't know how she was able to perform at the level she performed at last year after everything she went through, but I imagine she'll be even better this year. So let's talk about my concerns. That's a lot of talent. That much talent is expensive. When you spend that much of your cap space on your starting lineup, you're relying on hopes and prayers when it comes to depth. They do have Beck Allen, who's a proven commodity, but I'm having to talk myself into the rest of the roster, which isn't a great sign. There's no depth behind Griner at center and no true power forward at all. It's very hard to succeed in this league with so many talented bigs like that. On top of that, every player in the starting lineup is hyper competitive with a big personality. That can be a great thing that propels them to win, or it could turn into a disaster depending on how well everyone does or doesn't get along. I'm trying to be very polite in saying that I'm concerned about that, and the person in charge of making all these personalities work together and managing this roster's lack in depth is Nate Tibbetts, who has no W coaching experience whatsoever. Hell of a task for a rookie head coach, and I imagine he'll be leaning on associate head coach Christy Tolliver a lot. This is a playoff team. Now, some people have them contending for a top 4 seed, but I'm not ready to go that far. There will be plenty of fireworks. Hopefully it doesn't burn everything down. The Seattle Storm are back. Last season was awful. They lost a ton of talent, including Breanna Stewart and Sue Bird, so it was basically Jewel Lloyd against the world. She did her best and led the league in scoring, but that didn't translate into wins. They made some big-time moves this offseason. Is this a super team? What happened and what should we expect? Just like the Seattle Storm, Skylar Diggins-Smith is back. After giving birth, then being sent home and locked out of the facilities by the Mercury, she finally broke free and was signed by the Storm. We haven't seen her since 2022, but of the last 5 seasons she's played, she's made second team All-WNBA twice and first team All-WNBA 3 times. She's arguably the best two-way point guard in the league, super competitive and pissed off. She's a franchise player. The same can be said about Nneka Ogwumike, an automatic 17-7 throughout her career with the Sparks. Her efficiency dipped a bit last year, but I can't imagine it doesn't return to normal being surrounded by all this talent, where she should get much easier looks on offense. Nneka, Jewel, and Skylar are the big names, but Ezi Magbagor is an all-star in her own right and one of the best defensive centers in the league. Whether they go Sammy Whitcomb or Jordan Horston to round out their starting 5, how many teams other than the Aces can match that talent? Now, all the other teams with comparable top-end talent have depth issues. How do the Storm look? Honestly, not terrible. You'd have a tough time finding a backup center as good as Mercedes Russell. And depending on what they do with the starting lineup in terms of Whitcomb or Horston, whichever one comes off the bench is more than adequate. Their backup point guard situation is murky at best, but Skylar has always played a ton of minutes. This is absolutely a super team to me. They have so many weapons that complement each other's skill sets. You can't focus on Lloyd solely anymore, which makes her that much more dangerous. You know what you're getting from Nneka every single night, and Skylar is out to make the league pay for the bullshit she went through. I have them fighting it out with the Liberty for the second best record in the league. I would give a slight edge to the Liberty since they were together last season, and I think continuity matters, but I'd be more shocked to see the Storm not get a top 4 seed than I would to see them at number 2. And finally, the Washington Mystics snuck into the 7th seed last year before getting swept by the Liberty. Some pretty big changes this offseason. What can you expect? No Elena Deladon, who is taking the year off, possibly retiring for good. Certainly seems like she's done with the Mystics either way. She has struggled to stay healthy the 3 seasons she did play after winning MVP and leading them to the title in 2019. The decline in her health, if not necessarily her play, has coincided with the organization's struggles. 2022 was a bit of a bounce back year for both, but obviously that was short-lived. They also lost Natasha Cloud in free agency. That leaves a hole at the point guard spot. Do they try Brittany Sykes there? Maybe Julie Van Loo if she makes the roster? This wasn't a fantastic offensive team last year, and not having that position nailed down isn't going to help. Honestly, a lot of question marks here, so what do we know? Well, Sykes is one of the most athletic players in the history of the WNBA. She's a fantastic two-way player. She can make plays for others, although I don't think she's at her best running the point for long stretches, and I imagine they're going to need her scoring too much for her to do that anyways. They do have players who have been here a while who have done more in the past and could presumably take on those responsibilities again. Ariel Atkins is one of the better defensive players in the league and put up 15, 16 points a game the last time they were truly without Deladon for an entire season in 2020 and 2021. Same thing with Maisha Allen-Hines, who averaged 17 and 9 in 2020, but has seen her playing time go down a lot since then. But she has been getting minutes and shots in the preseason, so I'm wondering if that's a sign of things to come. Similar story with Carly Samuelson. Got her first real opportunity last year with the Sparks, made the most of it, hit like 43% of her threes, has been getting them up in the preseason too and knocking them down. And then there's Shakira Austin, who looked like she took that crucial sophomore step last season, but then she got hurt. Can she pick up where she left off this year? They don't appear to have a number one option though, just a bunch of second and third options at the top of the lineup and question marks the rest of the way down. Seems like the Deladon thing threw them for a loop, and now they're up in the air about whether or not they want to rebuild, which isn't a great way to do anything except stay stuck in neutral. Luckily for them, I do think other teams did enough to surpass them, and they have enough issues to miss the playoffs and get a higher draft pick. I'm interested to see how that works out for them, and I can't imagine they're going to be super exciting to watch. All right, that will do it. This has been another episode of Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. Very excited for this season. Hope you are too. Appreciate you liking, subscribing, rating, reviewing, and sharing. Drop your WNBA predictions in the comments and have a great week. I will catch you later.